Hey, and welcome to Crunchy Stewardship. My name is Katie Fiola Jones.
And my name is Chrissy Rombach. We are two cousins who are passionate about learning and sharing knowledge to equip others to steward their spiritual, mental, emotional, financial, and physical health in order to honor God in every aspect of their lives.
In our podcast, we take a deep dive into what it means to steward our lives as God originally intended for us with the resources that God has given us. We look at various topics like food, medicine, finances, mental health, and lots more through a natural lens and with a biblical foundation.
Before we get started in today's episode, if you've been enjoying our podcast, make sure you subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating. This helps other people find our show in the future. And if you haven't already signed up for our weekly newsletter, go ahead and take a moment and do that by clicking on the link in the show notes.
Today's episode is kind of an extension of last week's episode, which was all about gardening. And Chrissy and I talked a bit about growing your own produce in order to feed your family really well. You know, we want to focus on nutrient-dense foods that are healing and restorative and just keep us very healthy. But as Chrissy kind of mentioned last week, that's not always the case. Like, not all of us have the ability to have big farms. Maybe you have a patio that you could do a small raised garden bed, or you have some space in a window that gets really good natural light and you can do some herbs inside. But as far as getting good, organic, nutrient-dense food, it might be a bit challenging for you depending on where you're currently living. So in this episode, we wanted to talk about kind of the next best thing. If you're not able to produce your own food at home, the next best option would be to find somebody who is producing that good, organic, locally grown, nutrient-dense food, whether it is a fruit or a vegetable or even a meat. So today's episode is all about finding that local produce, finding your local farmers and purchasing those things from them. We'll talk a little bit about where to find them, how to find them, what you should know about like vetting certain people, because you don't want to just buy produce from anybody. And I don't know, we'll just see where the conversation goes with that, because if you have listened to a few of our episodes, we tend to have some random fun tangents, but hopefully you enjoy a bit of that.
Usually the best episodes don't have an outline. They kind of just happen.
It just happened. We jumped on today and we were like, do we have any notes of what we want to do and talk about in this conversation? We kind of just decided on a topic, but we have nothing. So today you're just getting this raw conversation on finding local farmers.
Straight from our brains.
Yes.
I love it. All right. Well, Katie, I know you do much better at this than I do because you go to farmers markets more frequently and you have found some local farmers. Even living in Michigan for what, like 3 weeks, you've already found like multiple different farmers that you can buy local food from and everything like that. So maybe we could start off and you just like give a little outline of like, how do you find these people? How do you vet them? What do you look for when you're finding these local farmers?
Yeah. It's actually been super fun. I was nervous moving out here in just the idea of needing to find providers of good food, because it's interesting coming from a big area such as the Denver metro area. There's actually a lot of good resources to find local foods. I mean, maybe not resources, that's not the best word to use, but just simply at our grocery stores, we actually have a good abundance of options of organic foods. And so we never had trouble finding organic options for produce. However, moving here in this itty bitty town that we live in northern Michigan, there is a tiny grocery store in town, and I probably can count the number of organic options on both of my hands. Like, we walked in one day and there was nothing. Like, there was a small, tiny produce section, and that was it.
That's like my 10-foot organic section in my grocery store.
Exactly. I actually kind of thought about our conversation a while ago, and like, luckily in your situation too, you did have the option to go to a different grocery store. For us, that actually meant driving like almost half an hour, like 22 to 25 minutes away to go to a larger grocery store, which is the Meijer grocery store. We also have Aldi, but that's also like 22 minutes away. They have a decent amount of organic options, but it's not that great. And Meijer does okay, but it's really far. So we wanted to try to find something that was a little bit better. And as I kind of mentioned in last week's episode, many times when you go to the grocery store, you can see a label on your food and it'll say organic, but you don't know all that goes into their processing, because even organic chickens and things like that, they tend to not have the best practices also for packaging and freezing and all the other production stuff that they do with chickens. Same thing with the way that produce is grown. It could be a hydroponic plant, which isn't bad, but it's not the best. And they don't have to disclose that on their products, whether it was grown with hydroponics. So that means that we really wanted to focus in on finding local farmers, because you can actually get to know them and find out a little bit more about how they're producing their foods, if they are using any pesticides, what are they doing to keep weeds at bay, all these different things that go into growing these foods for us. You can actually ask the farmer themselves. And a lot of times what I have found, and it has been super fun for us, you could just ask them to go and see their farm. And so many of them have been so gracious to be like, yeah, come, I'll give you a tour, which is really, it's been a lot of fun.
It's like those YouTube videos that you mentioned in the last episode of the entire garden tours. These are things like people invest so much time, money, and effort in their gardens. And so when other people are interested in seeing them, it's like, yes, let me show you my baby. And so asking a farmer or a gardener to see their garden is like a compliment to them, to
Absolutely.
figure out how they do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was a little nervous asking people about that, because in my mind, it is kind of a part of the process that for us, like, I'm trying to vet the farm a bit to be like, is this really where we want to be buying our produce or our meats or our milk or our honey from? And I want to know, like, what are they doing in order to produce these things? And so I was a little nervous because it kind of seemed like it was a job interview, right? Like, I'm going there and I'm coming to see their practices. But if those farmers, like, if those people truly stand behind what they're doing and how they're producing and growing and raising their food, then they're so happy to have you come by, which was actually the case for the Amish farmer that I met at the farmer's market. And I found out that he sells lots of pasture-raised meats, both chickens and pig and cow. And he also does raw milk, which is what we were mostly interested in. And I just asked him, like, could I come see your farm? And he was so excited. And he's like, please do. Here's my number and all this stuff. And he was so excited. So actually, while my sister was in town a week ago or so, I set up a tour of this farm. And my sister, my husband, myself, and our baby, we all went to this farm to go get a tour of it. And it was actually so much fun. So back to your question, Chrissy. You asked, how do you find these people? Well, I kind of just mentioned one of the ways that you can actually find them is by going to your local farmer's market and, finding the farmers there and seeing what they have to offer and asking them, is this all that you grow? Is this all that you produce? Is this all that you raise? Or do you provide more things? Do you have a list of things? What do you do to grow them? Are you using any pesticides? How are you raising your animals? Are they pasture raised? Do you use any growth hormones? Do you use antibiotics? These are all really good questions to kind of go through and ask as you are vetting your farmers. But that's one of the places that I have found that you can find local farmers, just because they're there selling their goods. Obviously, they're doing this as a business. They're growing produce for, to make money. But if they're not at the farmer's market, there's actually a ton of websites out there that have made it just a little bit easier for you to find good organic farmers. Just a couple I'll mention, but I'll add the links to all of them because I have found that some of these websites offer more options in certain areas than they do in others. So for example, there were some websites that I used when I was back in Colorado because I found them when I was still living in Colorado, even though we didn't really use them that much. And I found that some of them had like tons of people in Colorado, but then when I moved to Michigan, they didn't list that many farmers or producers or whatever it was that I was looking for. But vice versa, some websites have like an abundance out here in Michigan. So the one that I have found so far to actually be the best.
And that's the best across both regions, right?
Yes. The one that I have found to be the best is a website called localharvest.org. You don't have to remember that. We'll put it in the show notes for you. And they have definitely the best website, first off, because some of the websites you can tell aren't very user-friendly, but this one has been really good. It's easy to find local farmers. Another one that I found that had more options back in Colorado, but not very many here in Michigan, is called fromthefarm.org. Another one that I found is farmmatch.com. And then there's other websites out there about how to find even more specific things like local honey. I found that there's like a localhoneyfinder.org. So if you're looking for locally grown honey to help you with your allergies, especially, that's a really great way to do it. You can find it on that website. And even like if you're looking for raw milk, there's a website. There's actually two that I found that can be helpful. One is called realmilk.com and one is called getrawmilk.com. And so those have both been helpful. But again, going to your local farmer's market might actually be the best option because, for example, that Amish farmer that I mentioned, he's been doing this for years, but he is not listed on any of these websites because he's Amish and he does not go on the computer. So he is just not there. And so you're not going to find certain farms that aren't on the internet at all. So ask around and go to your local farmers markets, or just like ask friends who are also kind of on this journey to finding good local organic foods. They might be able to hook you up.
The finding friends to help is one of the ways that Max and I have found local foods. We have a friend who has bees. He literally has like 2 or 3 beehives in his yard, and he doesn't grow any other fruits or vegetables. He doesn't have a garden. So these bees are pollinating just like out in nature because he has a house like in the middle of the forest. And he doesn't eat honey. He just has a bunch of bees with beehives, but he doesn't eat honey. And so he told us at the end of the season this year, he's going to harvest 5 gallons of local honey for us. And he's only like 1 town over. So that's about as local can get other than your own backyard. And so I'm so excited for when he harvests this honey because I don't know where I'm going to store it. We're moving to a 1-bedroom apartment. So that's going to be a challenge. But we are about to get 5 gallons of local honey. And I'm very excited because it might last us all year. We actually will probably go through it in less than a year. But
definitely.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to that. Another thing that Max and I have used for finding local things is, so I shop at Sprouts quite frequently, specifically for my produce, just because Sprouts has such a more broad organic section. And so I feel like I can actually get what I want and it be organic. And so one of the things that I really like about it is online and even in the store, I think sometimes they have little labels and they're different color labels. So like red is like on sale and then green is organic and then the gray label is local. And so it'll like some of the items that they have in the store will literally have like a little local tag on the product. And so that's one way that I have, especially at least buying honey from the grocery store, I've learned, okay, this one in particular is the only local honey that is sold at my grocery stores. And so this is the one I'm getting, because if you're not getting local honey, then you're not getting the benefits of it. And so, yeah, that's one thing that I've been able to use. And so because of that, I don't really need to go out and find the specific farmers and things like that because I have it available at my grocery store. And so that's probably one big difference between living in a small town and a bigger city is like bigger cities, crazy enough, do have more access to local produce, even though there's a lot less space to grow local produce. So
yeah, they tend to source from like the outskirts. That's what I found. Like when we were in Denver, it's like there were a lot of farm towns, but they were over half an hour away, like 45 minutes to an hour in the plains of Colorado, like out east. Tons and tons of farms, but they had the ability to ship in their products to the Denver metro area and kind of sell them in there, especially at the farmers markets and stuff. You'd find people who were growing things out east, or even like peaches in the mountains. That's like a big thing, is Palisade peaches out in the mountains of Colorado. Believe it or not, it's kind of like a random place, but they have some of the best peaches in the world. Like I hands down have not had like better peaches than from this mountain town in Colorado. So random.
You know what's funny is peaches are one of those things that I feel like over time, they just are not nearly as good nowadays as they were when I was a kid. Like, I don't know what it is, if it's because like living in Texas versus now living in North Carolina. But like as a kid, I remember we'd buy the peaches, you cut them in half, you can twist out the seed very easily, and you've got like the red crispy on the inside, and it's crunchy and it's juicy and it's delicious. And I just cannot find that anymore. I don't know what the problem is, but the peaches now are different than they were.
Yeah, and I actually think, to your point, Chrissy, about like being in Texas versus North Carolina. So part of the reason that I think it's also really important to shop locally is because you think when you're in North Carolina, maybe, I don't know this for a fact, but here we're just hypothetical situation. Maybe they're really bad at growing peaches. It's not a good climate to grow peaches. So they have to ship everything in from somewhere like Texas, or even, I don't know, Mexico or California, wherever they're growing peaches, or Colorado, right? So
isn't Georgia the peach state?
Georgia, there you go. They're getting them all from Georgia, which I guess isn't that far, but maybe this isn't the greatest example, but for a lot of our produce, we have to ship it cross country, or we're getting it from another country even. And so it doesn't, like, you think that in order for it to last a long time, like the few days that it takes to ship, or several days, and then the few days in the grocery store before you go and buy it, they have to pick these fruits typically, or vegetables, before they're fully ripened on the vine, because once they're fully ripened, you think about a peach, when it is very ripe, it goes squishy and bad pretty quickly once it's hit that peak juiciness and ripeness. And so they have to get these foods, they have to pick them before they get fully ripened. And sometimes that means that you even get them in the grocery store when they're kind of hard and not very good. So finding things that are local, there's so many benefits. First, they're going to taste the best because they haven't traveled as far. They're more fresh, which also means that they still have more of their nutrients, more of their vitamins and trace minerals in them, because the moment that you pick something from its vine or its plant, wherever it's growing from, the moment you do that, it starts to lose its nutrient value. And so if it's traveling further, you kind of put the pieces together, it has lost a lot of its actual nutrient value. And so getting it locally also means that it's going to be the healthiest and the best for you versus getting it from the grocery store where it's, conventionally raised and has been, shipped far. So even if it's organic, it might not have the best nutrient value for you. So that's definitely one of the benefits of going local.
Yeah, I just think of like the comparison of the tomatoes, or as I mentioned in my previous episode, maters that my neighbor grew and gave us like a whole Ziploc bag of them. The maters he grew are they're so much better than any grocery store tomato I have ever purchased because they're taken off the vine when they're still green. And then I even learned at one point with tomatoes in particular that I think other fruits also, they will like gas them with a chemical that forces them to like change to their ripened color without actually ripening the fruit itself. And so with tomatoes in particular, that means you're getting an underripe tomato that's not as juicy, it's not as flavorful, but it looks good to the eye. And so you buy it and you're just missing out on all of those good things that you can get if it just stayed on the vine longer and you picked it right before eating it.
True story. I watched this video. It was really disturbing about bananas. It was somewhere overseas. I don't even know where it was from, but and this was a conventional banana. It was not organic, but they spray it with something that like they pick them basically neon green. You know that type of banana that is not ready to eat and it is bright green. And they spray it with something that helps it to I actually forget. It helps it to like slow down the ripening process because again, like it's going to be taking weeks to get to your actual pantry. So by the moment they pick it and then to the moment that you are actually eating it, it does like transform, but it never actually got fully ripened on the vine. And so you just really miss out. And the video was just like really crazy because I didn't realize this. Also, sorry, this is also really crazy. My friends and I have my Underground Crunchy Mamas text group that I've mentioned before, and we send each other like Instagram videos of all these like crazy, outrageous things that we've been learning. I learned, Chrissy, this was like so frustrating and sad, and I'm like, no, but it makes so much sense. I learned that anything when it says seedless has been like treated to basically become infertile. So they have some sort of antibiotic in them. So like seedless watermelons, seedless grapes, seedless oranges, seedless every fruit that you eat that is seedless, which is so many of the fruits that I eat, they are treated with an antibiotic that makes them infertile because seeds is like the fruit's fertility. And then therefore we are then going and eating this chemically altered fruit, which then chemically alters our own biology to hence become infertile. And this man who described this went into more detail about it, but I was just like, no, I love my seedless watermelons because, man, spitting out those seeds is very inconvenient, especially with a 1-year-old. And I'm like, we got to switch to the fully seeded everything fruits, and it's going to be really obnoxious, but it'll probably be much healthier for us.
Yeah. You mentioned the bananas earlier and like the spraying things on them to make them look better. So, when bananas ripen, they go like gradually from the bottom of the banana to the top, yellow to green, right?
Totally.
And then when they start to go bad and turn brown, they get brown spots everywhere, right? So in the grocery store, this was not my Sprouts grocery store. This was the one that I broke up with a little while ago, but I still go there to get the foods that are packaged and don't need to be fancy organic, like chocolate chips. They're going to be bad for you anyways. I'm going to buy the $2 chocolate chips rather than the $7 chocolate chips. Sorry about it. But anyway, so I was there and I glanced through the produce section because it just guides you through the grocery store that way. And these bananas were yellow with green spots, as if like I had never seen it before. And I took one look at it. I looked at Max. I was like, this is disgusting. That like the the ripening turning yellow was happening in the same way that it should actually be turning brown. I had never seen a yellow banana with green spots before, but I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh. So I don't buy bananas from them anymore. Well, I didn't really, but now I really don't.
Now you really don't. Like, really rub it in their face.
I still buy their chocolate chips, though. They're the cheapest.
So, some good questions to ask your local farmers would be, let's start with like meats. You know, if you're looking for a good farmer who is raising cows, like what should you find out about them? Well, you do want to know what they're obviously feeding the animals. That is typically your number one question that you should be asking them, because what they eat is what you eventually eat. So it actually equals the nutrient value and the healthiness of the meat that you would be eating. So you want to make sure that the animals are not eating soy products, because that's not a natural diet for them. They should be pasture raised on organic grass. Now, in Michigan, pasture raised, that can't happen year round because obviously there's snow on the pastures most of the frozen half of the year. And so in those months, you want to know that they're being fed something like an organic hay, like grass, basically like something that has been cut from the field that was meant for the cows, right? So you don't want them to have anything that's been sprayed, so no glyphosate, no nothing on it. You also want to make sure that they're not raised with antibiotics or any growth hormones to basically make them grow abnormally quickly or abnormally large, anything like that. I also learned, I'm a part of this newsletter that they teach you a lot of stuff about homesteading, and they actually teach you a lot about these kinds of things. And they had this whole newsletter about methane reducing supplements that are given to cows and how it actually genetically alters their milk and their meat. And so you want to make sure that they are not giving the cows any methane reducing supplements. Some of them do, even if they are pasture raised and all this stuff. I don't know if they can consider it organic if they're giving them these supplements, but they might. And I think that was one of the red flags. Was it's not a pesticide, it's not an antibiotic, it's not a growth hormone, it's a supplement. And so you want to make sure that they're not giving them this methane reducing supplement. And yeah, and you do want to ask them, like, can I come visit your farm to see what you're doing? And then you want to ask them, like, how are they treating their animals when they do get sick? So like cows, for example, they get mastitis just like a woman would if she's breastfeeding and has like a clogged duct. It would be mastitis, and that can be really painful, but it also can alter the milk that is coming out. Like, you'd think that if they have an infection, then the milk would also have that infection. So you want to know what they're doing to treat it, because it's a common thing, and it's not bad if they get mastitis, but it's just a matter of like how they actually treat it. And you just want to make sure that they are doing kind of more natural methods and not always treating them with like a bunch of antibiotics and stuff. So, and then the last thing, especially with cows, is like, how are you cleaning your machines? How are you cleaning the jars that they put the milk in? Is it actually a jar or is it plastic? You do want it to be like a glass jar, and you want to know how they clean it and how they put everything in, and just their cleaning process, especially if you are getting like raw milk, because raw milk does have lots of bacteria in it, because it's like you need that good bacteria and it's really healthy, but it also just means that when other bacteria get in, it gets contaminated pretty quickly. So you just want to be careful about that.
You know, I actually saw this thing on Instagram a little while ago. Don't quote me on this. I don't know if it's true. I did not fact check it. I'm just repeating the things that I saw on the internet, which may or may not be a good idea. But I did see that apparently they did a study and they looked under a microscope of like pasteurized milk from the grocery store versus raw milk straight from the cow. And the raw milk actually had less bacteria in it than the pasteurized milk. which I thought was interesting because the whole point of pasteurization is to decrease the amount of bacteria in the milk. But if your farmer is milking their cows in a very cleanly way and taking care of their cows and not using antibiotics, then the cows have the ability to actually produce clean, bacteria-free milk, which is a beautiful thing.
So, I mean, even to clarify that a little bit more, there is bacteria in it, but it's the kind that's really good for your gut, and that actually helps promote a good microbiome for you in your gut.
So we're talking probiotics and prebiotics and postbiotics rather than antibiotics.
There you go. Yes. So I did watch another video that my friend sent me. It was actually it's like a little clip from, I think, like some documentary, but this farmer explained how when you have cows that are raised really healthy, you know, they're getting lots of sunshine, they're pasture raised, they're treated well, they're fed well, they're cleaned well, all the things. Like they just have a good, happy cow life. Their milk, the shelf life of it is much longer than your pasteurized milk. But it's only in those certain situations. Now, what happened was that at a certain point, they decided that in commercially raising cows that they needed to be fed like a soy diet and had to be kept inside and all these things. And so they live a very sad cow life, right? And so because of that, the milk that they were producing, the raw milk, now had really bad bacteria in it. Like the bacteria was then like very nasty and really you could get all of the like salmonella or whatever, you know, bad food-borne illnesses would show up in it. And it was because they were treating the cows very poorly. So in order to kill off that bacteria, they decided to heat treat it, which is what is considered pasteurization, in order to kill it off. And so they're like, yes, it is much safer to drink it pasteurized. But what's interesting is now you lose these good bacteria that help you actually digest the milk properly. And so now we have all these people who have lactose intolerances because they can't digest the sugars in the milk properly because you're lacking the actual bacteria to be able to do that properly. So it's this whole cycle of now people can't actually drink milk, and people are like, milk is really bad for you because we have all these intolerances to it. But if you get back to the actual raw milk from a happy raised cow, it eliminates all those problems, and you don't need to pasteurize it. You do need to still be careful that it doesn't get contaminated once you have it outside of the cow. But that's the same thing. Like I go back to like thinking of when I was breastfeeding Malachi. It was the same thing with my milk. I would, you know, pump and I would have it in the refrigerator, and I would just be really careful that it wasn't going to get contaminated, that we weren't leaving it out. And it does have a certain shelf life, but you just need to be really careful with it. But it's super, super healthy when it's in its raw form because you haven't eliminated all of the good stuff and the protein from it and the good, healthy fats. So, yeah.
That kind of makes me think a little bit about humans also, that like if you have good mental health and you are mostly happy, you have a lot of joy in your life, you have a lot of fulfillment and satisfaction, you're less likely to get sick merely just from being happy than people who are sad and depressed and anxious and have poor mental health. They are much more likely to get physically sick. And so, I mean, animals are animals and humans are mammals. And so we act very similarly to the way other animals act in terms of like mental health versus physical health, and how that like living situation, how that connects to our body's health in general. And so, yeah, that's a interesting thing to keep in mind.
Stress plays a really big piece in our overall health. And one thing that I've kind of been learning too is if you are going on this health journey, it's actually like, let's take raw milk as an example, because it's a really good example. Like a lot of people, and myself included, I was really nervous to try raw milk because I have been told that it is so bad. I mean, it literally is illegal in other states. Like people think it's dangerous, and so they're like, we can't sell it. Nobody can have raw milk here. It's really hard to get in other states. Here in Michigan, we have to be a part of what's called a herd share. And so you have to literally, quote unquote, own a part of the cow in order to get milk from it. And so it's kind of like this subscription model where we pay monthly to board the cow, to keep it, to feed it, all these things. And so that's how you can get raw milk. But if it really stresses you out to do something like raw milk, even though you've been hearing how healthy it is, or to do certain things, like if it's stressing you out to go and find all these local farmers, the benefit of the foods might not be as good for you if you are just so anxious about it. And I've noticed that, like literally last night, Chrissy, this is kind of a funny story. Wes was making dinner and he was doing a great job. He made some green beans that we got from our farmer's market. He actually picked them out with Malachi last week at the farmer's market. Good, locally produced, organic green beans. And he had some chicken. And that was kind of all that he had made at that point. And I all of a sudden kind of panicked. And I was like, we have all these other foods. Like, let's make some quinoa, or like, let's make some potatoes. Like I have all these potatoes and sweet potatoes and all these things. Like we need to add more to our meal. And I was getting really anxious about it. And I literally blew up for no reason. And afterwards we were like apologizing to each other. And I was like, I'm sorry. I realized that the stress of just making a good healthy meal like had really gotten to me. And I listened to a podcast the other day of like, before you eat your food, you really should take time to recenter yourself, to calm down, because if you eat your food in an anxious state, your body actually does not absorb the vitamins and minerals as well as it would if you were just calm and relaxed and thankful for your food. So this woman was actually talking on this podcast all about she was talking about her cookbook, and she has this whole part of her cookbook about prayer and how important it is to kind of refocus and be thankful for your meal and to give thanks to God and praise him for that. And I was just like, this is so beautiful that not only is it something to be like, yes, thank you, God, for this food, but it actually helps your body to prepare to receive the food properly. So I'm like, that, God just really planned everything so perfectly.
Yeah, and when I interviewed my dietitian friend a few weeks ago, Abby Coggins, she also mentioned that in the interview of one of the best ways to combat guilt and being overwhelmed and all these emotions that come with food is merely just centering yourself right before a meal and giving thanks to God, because putting yourself in the mindset of being thankful for the food that you've given and being thankful for the ability to even have fresh food and fresh produce, that you don't live in a food desert, or if you do, that you have access to get outside of the food desert to get these foods. It really does help mend your mental health position in your relationship with food also.
I just love that. I really do believe that God designed all of this so perfectly together, and we silly humans have decided that God didn't do it right and that we had to come and fix all of it. And the more that I've learned, the more I'm just like, okay, the answer really is just like, what did God do originally? How did he originally design this? And how can I get back to that? And I think it's so beautiful when you think about local farmers. Your example of your friend Chrissy who has the bees, I think is such a good example too of like the community coming together to provide for one another, to help each other out. And you think about the way that cities really came to exist. I'm going through the Bible recap reading plan right now, and so I'm kind of like starting over from the beginning, and I just read Genesis like 12 through 14, I think it was today, where it's like Abraham and his family, and it was the time where Lot split up from him and they're going different ways. And like that's how like cities came to be, was like families just kind of were like, hey, right now we're too big to be together as one group. So Abraham was like, Lot, you've got to go this way, and my family's going to go this way. So you take that area and we'll take this area. And it's like, then a new city forms and a new town forms. And it's like, that's really how God kind of designed it, for you to be together as like a community, to have livestock together and to raise produce together and to kind of work together to just build one another up. And so I really love getting to find people who are already kind of growing these things, and then you can kind of help provide for them by paying for their goods, and then they can provide for you. There are things called community supported agriculture, so CSAs, and it's a really great way to support local farmers and also benefit from it yourself. So you actually get produce. So it's usually like some kind of a membership base where you pay a monthly fee, but that fee, kind of like a herd share that I explained, the fee goes to provide funds for the farmer. So sometimes you have to pay in advance so that the farmer has enough money to then go and buy the supplies to then plant and to pay their workers or whatever it might be. All CSAs are just slightly different. I'll provide a link too where the link actually helps you find local CSAs. And so then you pay a fee, and then you usually get like a box per week or per month of produce depending on the time of the year that they're growing things. So it's another great way to like work as a community. Instead of like trying to grow everything yourself, you can find someone who's already doing it and buy into their system to make sure that they're successful and that the whole community is fed well. So I just really like that, Chrissy. And we bought eggs the other day from some friends just because I'm like, I want to be able to support what they're doing and, you know, let them keep doing what they're doing and then get some good organic local eggs. So yeah.
One other thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about how like God created us to live in community with other people to help to feed each other and help to provide for one another. It's like, it also makes me think of the Lord said that it is not good for man to be alone. And so God literally in the first few chapters of the Bible says that we are communal creatures and that we are meant to live in community with one another. And so I would just encourage our listeners, like if you don't have people around you who are supporting you and lifting you up and encouraging you in your faith walk, encouraging you in your health journey, find those people. They're out there, and sometimes you just have to go looking for them, but you can find them. And so I fully encourage you to get yourself a small group of people, whether it be 2 or 3 even, just to be there alongside you and to encourage you in this, because changing your entire lifestyle to be more healthy is not easy to do on your own. Like there's a reason why it's such a big movement, is because it requires so much effort at the beginning, especially. And so once you're in it, it kind of becomes a new lifestyle, a new habit. But just like any new lifestyle of like starting to work out or waking up early or not using your phone before bed, like it does require a decent amount of mental effort and work at the beginning. And so to have those people around you to encourage you in your journey and to say, hey, you know, I made that same mistake last week too, but let's turn it around this week and together we're not going to make that mistake again. I think it's really great and makes it much more easy and reasonable to go through this process with somebody to hold you up.
Definitely. I've actually utilized a lot of Facebook, like in Facebook groups recently, to kind of find my people in a sense. I don't really use Facebook for anything else besides Facebook Marketplace, which I've talked about loving so much, and Facebook groups. And so moving out here, I've actually joined a number of like Michigan homesteading groups, or even just our local town has a Facebook group. And oftentimes people in there will post and say, hey, I have, like, a lot of people around here have farm stands, which is also like I love so much. And so people will say, hey, I've restocked my farm stand with fresh eggs or with asparagus. Asparagus right now is, well, I guess asparagus season is kind of just coming to an end, but June is really the asparagus month. And so a lot of people were like, I have asparagus at my farm stand, or rhubarb or something like that. And so people will like post pictures, and then they have these little farm stands, and it's just so helpful. And then I'm like, these are my people. Like, these are people who are helping each other out to get good, local, nutrient dense food. And it's really it's really awesome. So I don't know if you are not on Facebook. You don't have to be on Facebook to find things like this. Again, you can go to some of those resources, links that we mentioned, but it could be a good place to find people that are similar to you and think similarly. So check them out. You can also join our Facebook group, which is Crunchy Christian Mamas on a Budget. And we're talking about all this stuff. And obviously, we want to provide you with the resources and just tips to help find these things for yourself and to do it in a way that is most cost effective. When you buy from your local farmers and producers, there are times where it will be a little bit more expensive, but at the same time, I found that it tends to be pretty cost effective. In fact, I found out that the Amish farmer that we get our raw milk from now, he does also just offer like whipping cream or like heavy cream basically, and it's $7 for I think a quart. Now I'm getting mixed up. Yeah, I think it's for a quart. And the cream that I got at the grocery store was about $6 for the same amount. And I was like, oh, it's only like $1 more at this Amish farmer's house who is raising, pasture raised cows and stuff. So it's a lot better for just $1 more.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, think of the health benefit that you get from spending just that one extra dollar. The amount of health benefit that comes from that is probably astronomical compared to what you would get from buying the ultra pasteurized heavy cream from the grocery store that's been sitting on the shelf for a month already. It probably has really good probiotics in it and
Totally
things that boost your immune system and helps to keep you out of the hospital and not sick, which then helps you save money.
Yay.
I love saving money.
Me too. All right, Chrissy. Well, we have been chatting for quite a bit, but this is a topic that I love talking about, so maybe we'll rehash some things in the future. But any other parting thoughts, or do you want to close us out?
I guess I'll just close us out then. So to our listeners, thanks for tuning in to our conversation today. Make sure before you leave here, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and then go join us over on our Facebook group where we can continue this conversation, find people in your area who have similar mindset to you, who are on their faith and health journey, and they can come alongside you in community to build you up in this process. And we'd love to hear from you on that Facebook page, so go ahead, pop on over there. Until next time, my name is Chrissy.
And my name is Katie.
And thanks for listening to Crunchy Stewardship.
Bye.